Welcome, everyone. We here today are here with Agents of Change Continuing Ed, and we are going to be talking with Chantel Francis, who's going to be talking with us about trust-based relational intervention. It's really, really exciting stuff. It does a lot of background on attachment and trauma. She will get to talk a little bit more about this and how she uses it in her work. So I will introduce her in just a second. But I want to do our introductions. I am Megan Mitchell. I'm the founder of Agents of Change Social Work Test Prep. And now we have moved into the continuing education space. A little bit about me. I do private practice psychotherapy in Washington, D.C. I am working towards my play therapy credential. So I do a lot of play-based and expressive-based work. And then also I am in my doctorate program right now, and I am focusing on multicultural supervision, ethics, and diversity in the field. And I will give you a little rundown about Chantel's background. She can also tell you a little bit more about this. She has her MSW from Southern University at New Orleans, and she does work with students from 4th grade to 12th grade. And she does a lot of work with group therapy. She has done individual work. She's done community work. And she's going to tell you all about how TBRI has come into her practice. So we will have a nice deep dive where she can tell you a little bit more about that as well. We're so happy to have her here. Some housekeeping things before we start our conversation. We're going to go over our learning objectives. Participants will be able to explain the principles and application of TBRI. She will explain that in the 3 principles there. Develop and apply skills in trust building and crisis intervention. It's very funny that right before this conversation that we're about to have, I was just telling her how I was dealing with a crisis with a client. So this is very much both in our worlds. And then lastly, participants will be able to cultivate a reflective and adaptive practice. Why is this important? It's important for a lot of different reasons. We're going to talk about trauma-informed work, how understanding trauma comes into play here as well. This approach is rooted in trauma-informed care, which I'm sure Chantel will be able to talk to us a little bit more about how she sees it and how it comes to play in the lives of her clients. It enhances relationship building skills. I'm sure Chantel will talk about this, but really it's all about relationship building, and that's so important. We're going to talk about the hierarchy of needs, meeting the needs, the students' needs, the individual's needs first before we can move up that hierarchy. And lastly, it promotes effective intervention strategies, right? It provides evidence-based practical strategies for addressing complex behavioral issues, supporting emotional regulation, and facilitating positive behaviors. So, without further ado, I am going to hand it off to Chantel. Go ahead and introduce yourself and how you got involved with TBRI work or how you even learned about it.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chantel. So I have been in the social work field for the past 16 years. Social work was kind of for me, I just knew I was going to go into social work at the age of 6. I was in foster care, and I just knew that my social worker found me a home. I was adopted at 6. And so after that, I was like, I want to do what she does. So that's kind of how at the age of 6, I said I wanted to be a social worker, and that's what I did. But I came into play with TBRI about 2 years ago when I started working at an alternative school. Like you had said earlier, grades 4th through 12th. And so we were introduced to TBRI. At first, I was kind of like, how is this going to work? But the more I started learning about it and the more that I started learning how to do it, I saw how effective it was. So then I started doing the trainings, and right now I'm currently doing a training to become a practitioner so that I can teach others how to do it.
Awesome. A little bit more. I love that your own personal story has shaped this as well. do you feel that your personal story of wanting to be drawn to this field at a young age, do you feel like that gives you some more insight into this protocol and being trauma informed in your work?
I do believe that my personal story does help. I think that when we experience trauma at a young age, that we're not really taught how to deal with it. And or sometimes we don't tell anyone what trauma we're facing, and that comes out much later in our lives. And people don't realize it's because of past experiences or why you don't trust people or why
Right.
you act the way you act. So I think when you start realizing that trauma, sometimes not just current but past trauma, really affects our kids. And sometimes certain cultures, it's what happens in our house stays in our house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of trauma is never dealt with, because you're not supposed to take things that happen in the house outside of the house.
Absolutely. And I mean, we could get in a whole discussion about this, but if you think culturally and systematically, a lot of systems have failed. Particularly, I'm thinking of marginalized populations, people of color. So there's that, they don't trust the system either. So there's
Correct.
that piece, that barrier as well. Do you see that in some of your work that you do, the cultural piece or the just the structures that we live in, not necessarily always being set up to help those that need help?
Yes, I definitely see that. I see a lot of my kids are in the court system. I see a lot of them, they're just kind of the ball gets dropped. They're just passed through. And or you have a lot of what I call pop-up agencies that say they're going to do all these things and they don't really provide these services. And then the family and the kids are just kind of left there.
Yeah,
And so after a while, the families stop buying into it because they're like, well, we went through the court, they didn't do anything. Counseling didn't do anything. And then the parents get frustrated because they're like, okay, I'm trying to get the help, but it's not working.
absolutely. I see that all the time too. It seems like sometimes there's just barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier, and that itself becomes traumatic, right? I've tried to access services or I keep facing these struggles. What do I do? I see it all the time, and I personally don't have a solution other than our systems need to change, but I have a lot of empathy for my clients because I have seen it too, and I'm sure you have, trying to advocate for services or provide, referrals to different sources, and it seems impossible sometimes.
It does. It really does.
Yeah. So tell me and everyone a little bit about TBRI. What does it stand for and how do you use it?
Okay, so TBRI is a trust-based relational intervention, and it focuses on three principles: connecting, empowering, and correcting. So basically, how it works is you always want to connect with the clients. You're trying to connect with them, and that's like the attachment disorder. Like a lot of people don't have attachment. So
Yes.
you have to build that trust with them. And I've learned that you have to be very consistent. You have to say
Mhm.
what you're going to do, and you have to be the same no matter what. And if you have to change, you have to let them know. Like I know with my kids, I'll tell them today's not a good day for Miss Francis, so she's not about joking today, but they know that about me. Like they can read how I'm going to interact with them. We call it temperature checks.
Okay.
So every day the kids will come in and I can tell how a kid responds to me, what kind of day we're going to have. And I'll make a mental note to go check on that student later because they were a little off this morning. So something must have happened. And the kids like that because they know they don't have to say anything. They just know by the way they say good morning, I know something's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to be really in tune with
Yes.
students, and they probably are also in tune with you in a way.
Yes, they're very, very in tune. I know that when we came back from Christmas break, I had a death in the family, so I wasn't the happy-go-lucky that I usually am. But the kids knew that, and they came to my office and like, whatever's going on, Miss Francis, we got you. And that just was like, wow. They just knew that me being in my office and not greeting them in the morning, something must have been wrong.
Right. And that goes back to that piece of being very predictable.
Mhm.
Something was different in the schedule, right? And that is how they were able to see, what's going on here?
Yes.
Awesome. You said you work in an alternative school, right?
Yes.
What, for people that might not be familiar with alternative school, who would be a candidate for a student that would be in an alternative school? I'm guessing that maybe traditional education either was not a good fit, or I'll let you speak more of this. Maybe there was behavior issues, learning issues, attendance issues. What would land someone in an alternative school?
So kids come to alternative school for different reasons. A lot of what I'm noticing is behavior, fighting,
Mhm.
being very disrespectful toward teachers. So basically, they have to have so many write-ups at their what we call their home-based school, the schools they
Okay.
come from. So they have so many write-ups, and then they go to a hearing, and at that hearing, it determines if they're going to come to the alternative school. But like I said, it's for behaviors, skipping class, not going to school. Right now, a lot of our kids come because of drug related. They
Mm.
either have something on campus or they came to school high. Vaping is a very big thing right now,
Yes.
finding vape pipes on the campus. So a lot of them will come to us. A lot of my high schoolers will come for drug related issues.
Okay. Um, and is it very much that their home-based school said we can no longer serve you? And that right there is a rupture of the system, a rupture of trust. So these students that are coming in, where do they kind of come in with how they feel about the school system?
Most of them come in because they're upset. The parents come in because sometimes, especially my kids that come because of drug related, a lot of times it's the first time they ever got in trouble and they shipped
Mm.
off to an alternative school. And then the parents are like, this is the first time. Why couldn't they have done something differently except instead of shipping them off to the alternative school? And then what I find is some kids start off at the alternative school and then they become, like we call it, institutionalized and start picking up some of the negative behaviors of the others. So some that might only be there for a grading period end up
Uh,
staying a year or 2 years later, they're still there because
okay.
they just keep getting into trouble.
Cycle, right? It's like,
Cycle.
yep, yep, yep. Um, so knowing that TBRI is trust is in the name of this model, how do you build trust with some of these students, knowing that they might not be very trusting of adults or trusting of systems or feel like I can't be vulnerable because of all of these different things that have happened in my past?
So what I tend to do with my kids is I'm very consistent with them. I'm a jokester. I'm not, they tell me that I'm not their average therapist because I don't always believe that you have to sit across from each other. Sometimes it's me walking up and down the hall talking to them. Sometimes it's me popping into the different classrooms and walking around saying, what you working on? Oh, I bet you don't know that answer. Just kind of doing these little things with them. Or if I have a kid that's in crisis, sometimes it's just me sitting next to them and not saying anything.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they'll come in and say, I don't want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I'll turn around and start typing on my computer. And they're like, so you're not going to talk to me? You just said you didn't want to talk. So it's not forcing anything. It's just
Yeah.
really letting them come to me. And when they feel comfortable, then they'll open up. But it's also always being, I say, authentic, being yourself,
Yes.
100% yourself and never changing because they know that my kids know I'm going to tell them the truth no matter if you want to hear it or not. I'm going to tell you the truth.
Yep. And if we're talking about trust, that signifies trust, right? That you're being your authentic self, which invites them to come in and be their authentic self.
Right.
Do you see how do you gauge when a kid is just closed off and you can tell that trust is not an easy thing to come by? What might that look like? What might that student look like that is closed off and I don't want to talk to you? I don't trust you.
So for me, I have a student. The student can go from 0 to 100 really quick. We'll see the behaviors of, like the kids like to call it, flashing out, where they're very angry, they're
Mm.
yelling, sometimes they're hitting themselves, they're pacing. And for me, what I do is kind of, they'll be like talking, but they'll talk at a higher level. So I
Mhm.
tell them, I'm not raising my voice at you. So don't raise it at me. Let's come down. So I'll let them get them to come down with their voice, and I'll let them pace, and I'll let them do, as long as they're not hurting themselves, I'll let them get their frustration out, but I try to de-escalate them to a level to where they've calmed down and they're ready to talk.
Yep.
And I find that by doing that, you're not yelling at them, you're not demanding anything of them, you're just letting them have their moment as long as they're respectful in those times. I'm not yelling back and not cursing. And then when they come down, they're more willing to talk.
Yeah, I see that a lot too. And I work with parents and I talk about co-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
If we raise up to their energy level, it's not going to come back down. So I have so many parents say, "You're so calm." And I'm like, because I have to be if I want them to calm down. It's all about the nervous system and the brain, right? We
Right.
talked about when you're in crisis, you're not rational.
Right.
So there's not going to be any deep thinking. There's not going to be any problem solving until we get them to a place of stability.
Correct.
Um, absolutely. And a lot of times they've probably been met with adults or peers that when they yell, peer adult yells back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, how how much do you have to also engage family members, school staff, and how do you, as the school provider, help them build these relationships with people in their lives as well?
That has been like the biggest challenge because I believe that a lot of adults feel that when a child does something, you're supposed to correct it. And I feel like a lot of people believe that with TBRI, you're letting them get away with things.
Yes.
We tell you they're not getting away, but they have to trust you. You have, and before you can correct a child, they have to have some type of trust with you. So
Right.
it's like you're building a trust, but I use a lot of it as teachable moments. So with the staff, when kids do things, or like if I'm talking to an adult and they interrupt me, I'm like, what's a different way we could have done that? I'm all about redirecting, and TBRI is very big on redirecting the behavior and making them teachable moments. And so I'll be like, what's another way? And they're like, and I'll say, oh, I think you meant to say, excuse me, Miss Francis, I wanted to ask. And they're like, they'll stop and they'll look at me, and I'm like, I'm really thinking that's what you wanted to say. And then they'll say it. And then the next time they'll like, they'll do it, they'll remember, oh, wait, hold on. Excuse me, I need such and such. So I use a lot of things as teachable moments. And I find the struggle with staff and even with parents, they don't realize how important those teachable moments are. They just want the behavior to be fixed, solved, and they don't use those moments as to redirect them, the behavior.
Right. And I think a lot of this for adults, parents, it's a lot of relearning or
Yes.
re-examining the way we were raised, right? I have a lot of parents that say, I expect them to follow the rules because that signifies respect. And so we have to kind of break that down. Where does that belief come from? Where does that value come from? And oftentimes it is, this is how I was raised. This is how my household was. So I think there is, for the adults, sometimes a lot of stepping back and saying, why do I expect this? What value does this play in my life?
Right.
So you talked about the three principles. Let's kind of break them down a little bit. Tell me more about the first principle, connecting. What does that look like? I'm sure that's building rapport, but what are some ways you do that?
So connecting is what we, like we said, that's the part of the attachment theory. So with that, we look at mindful, and that's being self-aware of ourselves, of others, of the student, and their environment, just being really mindful of those things. We have kids that'll come in the morning and something has happened at home. It has nothing to do with us, but they've either gotten in a fight with their parents, or they were fussed at or something, or they worried about something that might happen with the parent if the parent has to go to court. So we have to be mindful that when they come in, they have all these other things. And the first thing you tell them is, why don't you have this, and this? They don't hear any of that. They're just angry.
Yeah.
And then under connecting, we have the engagement, and that's where we build trust just through nonverbal communication. Like I said, a lot of it is me sometimes just sitting next to them. If they say, I don't want to talk, okay, that's fine. I'm going to sit here and continue doing what I was doing. And then when you're ready to talk, I'm available. Sometimes that's them just coming into my office, taking deep breaths, going into my little corner where I have a chair. I have the rain sound playing. They have a stress ball. And sometimes they just need those 10 minutes to cool down. And they're like, okay, I'm ready to go back.
Yep.
Um, so that's all under connecting, just and every day we do what we call nurturing, 30 minutes of nurturing. So
Mm,
basically, every class, you have the feeling wheel, and every day they have to give us a feeling word. And it can't be good, it can't be fine. Like, I want an actual feeling word. And so after we do their feeling word, we ask them a question. The question can be just something simple. I know like their favorite one was, is it okay to break up with someone over text message? And the kids really love talking about that. So we'll talk about a question. And then at the end of the 30 minutes, we'll say, what can you do to have a successful day? And so what happens is throughout the campus, staff is saying, okay, what did you say today to be successful? Are you being successful? And if they're not, they're like, okay, well, we messed up this half of the day. What can we do the second half?
yep.
So teaching them that just because you messed up, you can get a redo. How can we fix it and
Absolutely.
turn it around?
And I've worked in schools for many, many, many years. It sounds like this approach might be very different than what they've seen in other settings, right? Where you messed up, here's your consequence.
Right.
Yeah. So there's many, many, many ways. Is all staff trained? Does not all staff trained in TBRI, but are they trauma informed? What does the school do to make sure not just you are able to provide these trusting and secure relationships? How about other people on campus or other staff?
So at the beginning of the school year, I will do a presentation on my program, and
Yeah.
then we'll talk about TBRI. We'll talk about how it looks, how to respond to the kids, and we teach everyone how to do the 30 minutes, what we call nurturing groups. And everybody is trained in it.
Okay, that's great. And that I love that, and that's every day, right? Like this is
Yes.
a part of the curriculum. They know what to expect, that consistency piece, which is great. The second step or principle of TBRI is empowering.
Yes.
How does that work? What does that look like?
So basically, that looks like the physical needs.
Mm,
So we know that if kids' physical needs aren't met, they're not worried about learning anything. If they're trying to figure out, am I going to have food when I get home,
yes.
or where I'm going to sleep, or if my clothes are dirty, what I'm going to do. So we've been very lucky. We had a church donate a washer and dryer. So now
Awesome.
we have that to where if a family needs to come and wash, or if we need to wash a kid's uniform, we have that for them. Um, and then every day at 2 o'clock, we give them a snack. And that's something with protein, a protein snack.
Yeah.
And so that way, if they're hungry or they're not focusing or they're losing focus, at 2 o'clock, they know they have this snack coming.
Mhm.
And it's funny because the kids look forward to that snack at 2 o'clock. Like if it's 2:05, they're like, where's the snack?
Where's
Like
the
what's
snack?
going on? But that helps them kind of get through the rest of their day because we don't get out until 4. So it's like they have that kind of like, okay, I get a snack, my basic need of if I'm hungry, I have that.
Yeah.
And then what I do is a lot of kids before they leave, they're always asking me for snacks. And I notice that if a kid comes in early in the morning asking for a snack, or if they're asking for a snack before they leave, 9 out of 10 they don't have anything at their house. So
That's their way to get food.
yes. So a lot of times in the mornings, I'll have different things in my office that they can
Mhm.
come and snack on. And then in the afternoon, I'm always giving out bags of chips or just different little things. They'll
Yeah.
stop by my office and they're like, you have chips, you have this. And they get to go in my little drawer, pick whatever they want, put in their books, put in their little computer bags, and nobody ever knows. It's
Right.
very discreet.
Yeah. That is so important. I have had many, many, many students where they're not focusing. And there's this expectation, well, they need to be participating. And I said, they didn't sleep last night, right? They're tired. Right? I don't function well when I'm hungry, when I did not sleep. And I think that we have to always go back to that hierarchy of needs, like basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, right? Has to be met, or else we're not going to safety. It has to be met before we can move to some of those higher level things. That's first and foremost.
Right. And I think that the kids know that my office, we just recently had a teacher ask the girls, they come to my office every morning getting lotion or
Yeah.
different things for their hair or just different things. And a teacher asked, why y'all didn't do this at home? And I'm thinking to myself, maybe they don't have these things at home. Or
Absolutely.
sometimes as I'm teaching them, or they're asked for lotion, I'm like, oh, we don't put that on our face. We use this kind, and I'll go in my personal bag and give them this lotion. And it's like not only am I teaching them how to become young ladies, but I'm teaching them proper hygiene and proper ways to take care of themselves and how important it is to smell good and look good. And if you look good, then you feel good and your self-esteem
Right.
is higher. So I think it's a lot of work with the adults and the staff to understand that sometimes we do things for a reason. And sometimes we have to understand, like you said, their home life. They may not have these luxuries or these things at home.
Right. And we just, for me, it was a lot of reflecting on my own privilege. And I think sometimes people don't see that. A lot of people don't even have access to washer and dryer in their building. We also had a washer and dryer at all the schools I ever worked at, and that got used way more than I ever thought that it would be used. Um, and a lot of times that is for what I saw, you can tell me what your experience is at your campus. That was a big, big, big thing is kids pick up on that. If you're coming with the same clothes every day, or you have an odor, or your hygiene is not, you know, you're not able to shower as often as you need to. There's a lot of shame that I think comes around that. And for in my experience, that's what students felt the most embarrassed about is people are noticing these things.
Yes, we have that a lot at our school. So I have created a uniform closet to
Mhm.
where the kids, if they come to school or we notice that their pants are dirty, we'll let them go get another uniform out the uniform closet and we'll wash their current uniform. And so that way they can take home the clean set. Um, and if we have to wash the next day, we'll keep the rotation going. Um, but we do notice that we'll try to do like a hygiene class with the whole school.
Yep.
So we're not pinpointing anybody out. And we'll talk about the importance of personal hygienes. We call it the hot spots, making sure you hit all your hot
Yes.
spots. And I'll do that with the nurse. We just recently had one where we did the boys and then we did the girls. So that way nobody would feel embarrassed or couldn't feel like they couldn't ask certain
Right.
questions. But yes, hygiene is a very big issue at our school.
And they're at that age, right? You work with 10 to 18-year-olds. I work with young people too. This is developmentally appropriate for them to be interested in what their peers think about them, right? That is exactly what they should be doing developmentally. So it's really hard when your peers are maybe making comments about what you're wearing or your hygiene.
Right. And that's kind of the biggest thing that I've talked with a lot of the kids about bullying. I'm like, that's considered bullying when you're picking on or you're making comments about somebody. And even though you might think it's funny and it's a joke, one joke spreads around. And then when you have a whole cafeteria, a whole group of people laughing, even though you didn't say a student name, that student know you're talking about them. And so we have to, I'm very proactive about teaching them about bullying. I'm like, because that's considered bullying.
Yeah.
And so when you talk to them and you get them to realize, then you see the compassion, the empathy in the student after, because then they feel bad
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. And that's a lot of times having to have those conversations and just building empathy, building perspective, and kids are kids, right? This is tale as old as time. This will happen now, it's happened in the past, and it will continue to happen in the future because there is the brain's not fully developed and developmentally appropriate, very self-absorbed at this age.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So we talked about connecting, we talked about empowering. One quick question about the empowering. Do you feel that when you've built that connection, their basic needs are met, are they able to better advocate for themselves and what they need? Because I could see that being part of empowering as well.
Yes. So my kids are very good about coming into my office. They know my rule. If my door is unlocked, that means I don't have anything out. That's confidential. So you can go in, get what you need, and
Yep.
come out. They're very good about either emailing me saying I need X, Y, and Z, or just coming to my office saying I need this. They're more comfortable. And what I've done is I've put hygiene products in different areas of the school with certain teachers that I know the kids talk to. If they don't talk to me, they talk to these teachers. So I know that they feel comfortable asking these teachers for things that they need as well. So if I'm not there, they always have somebody else that they know has the products that they need.
And I think normalizing is so important too, right? It's not anything to be ashamed about, right? Like you can
Right.
access this if you need it. And here's
Right.
yeah, that definitely goes into the empowering piece because it's a making something accessible to someone is empowering.
Yes.
Yeah. The last principle we have is correcting. I love that this model does connecting, empowering, correcting. I tell parents all the time, connection before correction.
Mm-hmm.
And that speaks to this. So tell me more about that correcting piece and what that might look like from a TBRI approach.
So basically, with correcting, we've looked at it to where you're shaping the behavior proactive and responsive. So basically, you're disarming the fear based behavior. So that
Hmm.
goes back to the frontal lobe. If it's up here, that means they're not listening to anything you're saying. But once it's closed, then you're able to correct the behavior. So after we've connected, after we've empowered, then I can come in and say, okay, what's another way we could have done that? And
Yep.
that's always my biggest thing. They lie because they call it Miss Francis philosophy. What's another way you could have done that? Or all my other thing is, what did you say? And that gives them key to, okay, what I said wasn't appropriate. I'm gonna change it, but Miss Francis is not gonna yell at you. She's not gonna fuss
Right.
at you. And I'm always telling them that I'm not fussing, I'm educating.
Yes.
And that kind of lets them know that, okay, I'm teaching you what you can do differently because not everybody knows you like I know you. When you go back to your home based school, they don't know you, they don't know your triggers, they don't know, all they see is an upset student. So what can you do to advocate for yourself to get across how you feel without being disrespectful or rude? And so I always teach them how to how to work at their school and in the real world too, because not everybody's going to take the time to figure you out.
Right. And they will make assumptions and we can't control that, right?
Right.
I talk a lot to my teens and adolescents about that is I get you, or I try to, right? I try to build those relationships, but some people don't have the opportunity to know the real you, right? So there's that is what it is.
Right.
Yeah. And do you find that because you have built upon these first two steps, connecting and empowering, when you do get to the correction stage, which really is just about problem solving, I would say, and doing things a different way or thinking differently, do you feel that they're more open to receive that because they do trust you and they do feel this person genuinely cares about me and wants me to work on problem solving or finding a solution to this problem?
I do. I feel that a lot of times I don't even have to say anything. Sometimes I can walk, like if all the kids are in the cafeteria, I can walk in and they'll just stop because
Yep.
they already know what I'm about to tell them. Or if I'm coming around the corner, they'll be like, uh-oh. And I'll tell parents this all the time. If I come into a meeting, a kid shouldn't stop because I walked in. They should stop because you walked in. So
Yeah.
you have to build that rapport, that connection with them because they respond differently to me than as their parent.
Yep.
Um, and for me, a lot of times I can tell them, what's a different way we could have done that? Even after they come down from it, I'm like, my biggest thing is, what did you do wrong in the situation? Helping them understand why they got in trouble, if they're getting suspended or if they're getting a write up. My biggest thing is to show them what they did wrong in that situation so that they know next time, let's not repeat it. Let's highlight, because I think a lot of
Yes.
times we correcting, but we don't tell them why we're correcting.
Right, right. You did
And
this
I,
wrong. Okay, okay.
exactly. And I feel like adults feel that they're a child. We're not supposed to, that mentality of their children, we're not supposed to explain ourselves because we're the adults. But sometimes if you don't explain why, they don't know how to fix it, or they don't know why you're fussing at them.
Right. And they oftentimes, this is the piece I think they take it so they get so ashamed.
Mhm.
And that really does affect self-esteem, right? They're always telling me what I'm doing wrong. I can't do anything right. And I see that as a big indicator of self-esteem and how teens and young people feel about themselves.
And I think the other thing that I come across is when adults are talking about a child in front of that child,
Hmm.
and you're noticing the body language, and you notice the leg shaking, you notice the fists are starting to ball up because the child is becoming angry again.
Yeah.
And they tell me all the time, "Oh, you're just trying to save them." No, my job is to de-escalate.
Yes.
It's always to de-escalate first and then go back and figure out what happened. But in the moment, my job is to de-escalate. And they say, "Oh, well, you're taking the child's side." It's not about taking sides. It's at the end of the day, I can't work with a child if they're up here. I need them to come down and de-escalate and then figure out what happened.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is psychoeducation too, around the brain, crisis, fight, flight, nervous system regulation. The sometimes I have a very hard time conceptualizing this for providers or people that maybe are not in the mental health space. So
Mhm.
how I try, and I told you this before we jumped on our conversation, sometimes the way I describe it is, think of a young child that's tantruming, right? They're kicking, screaming, they're on the ground. Would you be able to tell them to use to have a conversation with them when a child is tantruming? No, right? Because they are in a heightened state. It's the same with anyone. It doesn't matter, even if they're a teen, an adult. When we are in crisis, we cannot access the problem solving skills, right? So it's not about saving them or giving them a pass or letting them manipulate. I've heard that they're manipulating you. I'm like, let's have a conversation here. Let me tell you about a little bit more about what, from my perspective, I am seeing is happening with their nervous system and being able to access some of that higher level thinking.
Right, exactly.
So lots and lots of psychoeducation around that. Do you, in TBRI, do you do any psychoeducation with the kids, such as you are, in that talking about the frontal lobe, talking about fight, flight, or freeze? Do you do some of that discussion with them?
I do. I will tell them that a lot. I have one student and they go from 0 to 100 really quick. And we literally just had this conversation last Friday. And I'm like, there's something that's triggering you to go from 0 to 100. No matter what adult talks to you, you go from 0 to 100. Something is making you angry, but you have to figure that out. I can't figure that out for you. We have what we call grief group that comes, and I'm like, let's look at the pattern. I was like, when you were going to grief group, you had no behavior issues. The minute 2 weeks before grief group was about to end, you started getting referrals back to back. You started
Mhm.
getting in trouble. I
What's
said,
going
so
on?
something you're not addressing. And when I showed that to the student, you could see the look. And I'm like, it's not for me, not for you to tell me. It's for
Right.
you to figure out. What can you do, or what do you need to work on so that way you're not triggered and you're not always in that mode of defensiveness.
Yeah.
And once I did that, the student just kind of looked at me and was like, I'm like, you're angry about something. There's definitely something there. Let's look at the data. Let's look at your referrals. And like I said, I wouldn't be comfortable sending you back to your home-based school because you go from 0 to 100. You'll be right back here with us.
Yeah.
And so I definitely talk to them because I tell them, and even though it hurts their feelings, like, what? I'm like, yeah, because I'm setting you up for failure. If I send you back into your environment and you haven't corrected any of the behaviors.
Right. What has changed? Like you said, if nothing's changed, they're going to be right back or in a worse spot than they were prior.
Right.
Yeah. And that to me kind of ties into all three principles, right? You're doing that connecting, you're doing that empowering, and you're doing that correcting, and that's going to lead to behavior change in the long run.
Yes. And I would have to say that with doing TBRI, just this school year, we've sent over 50 kids back, and knock on wood, not one of them have came back.
Amazing. I was going to ask what results you've seen or how do you know this is working?
Yeah. One, we send kids and they don't come back. This has been the second year I've been at the school, and we've had high numbers of kids not returning. Prior to me getting to the school, it was a rotating door. Like
Yep.
they would go, come back, go and come back. Um, I can say it's working at our school because we still have some of the behavior issues, but our principal has made it to where we have these things of de-escalating. I have a punching bag. We have where they can just come sit in a corner and not say anything. We have what we call in-school suspension, to where our principal will give them a cool down day, to where
Yeah.
they're not getting suspended, but they're going to take the rest of the day to cool down and then come back to their classes the next day.
Mm.
Um, so all these different things have helped with the behavior at our school.
Yeah. And I think that is a huge success, right? Like,
Yeah.
and in just 2 years, right? Imagine in 5 years from now, if this continues, what I would love to see is this happen in all schools. So it doesn't have to necessarily be just alternative schools, but I've worked in many schools. Every location is different, every system is different, and there's a lot of things that need to happen in schools. But I think this is amazing work that you're doing. I guess my final question before we wrap up is, how do you think TBRI can be used in not just the school setting, but if someone's in I think it can be used for any setting, but what benefits do you think it could have to someone just starting out in the field or someone who's been in the field for a very long time?
I think it's very beneficial because it teaches you the most important things, especially when you're dealing with trauma. And I think no matter where you work in this field, you're going to come across trauma
Yes,
in
absolutely.
some form. And so you have to build that trust. And excuse me, with some of our clients, the trust piece, connecting. Excuse me. It's the connecting part of it.
I have a little cough too, so I get it.
Yeah, it's definitely connecting with the clients. You have to connect. You have to build a trust. And it doesn't matter if you've been in this field 15, 20 years, or if you're just starting out, you
Yep,
have to build trust.
absolutely. I think it's the crux of everything that we do. That's why we do this work. If you don't have trust, you're not going to get anywhere.
Right. And I learned that, I guess I was doing TBRI before I knew I was
Yeah.
doing TBRI.
That's what I was thinking this whole time. I'm like, oh, I feel like I do some of this stuff. Or
Yeah,
yeah,
we do. A lot of us do. I know when I started off at foster care, I was thinking, I'm this young 20-some-year-old taking people's kids, and I have no kids of my own.
hmm.
But excuse me. I built the trust with the parents, and I was able to help them get their kids back.
Yeah.
That really, I'm like, okay, so I've been doing TBRI since I entered the field, just not knowing what it was.
Yeah, yeah. I get that. I definitely encourage people to check out this. It sounds like there is a formalized training process you can go through.
Yes,
You're going to be going through, so I'm guessing I will have links to the website. People can learn more. But I just think this was a really good discussion of, like you said, maybe you're not trained particularly in this modality, but trust is the base of everything that we do as social workers.
yes, it is. And The training is not it's not a hard training. It's a 2 day training
Right.
and it's a 3 day training to where you learn about each principle.
Mm.
And the last training is a extensive like 10 weeks of coursework, and then you go for a week um if you want to become a practitioner.
Awesome. I very much as I am in the field more, I definitely see the benefit of people doing, becoming practitioners or becoming trained in a certain space. Because, so for example, I'm doing play therapy. I just find that you get so much support. You're with other like-minded people, and usually the people putting on these trainings are very supportive and offering resources as well.
Yes, they are. And I think when you have these, like you said, special trainings, you're not so stressed. The work day is not as stressful because a lot of them be like, oh, today was stressful. And I'm just kind of walking around like, okay. And it's like, I mean, of course, we have our moments where we're like,
Right.
ooh, crisis after crisis, but the way that I work with the kids compared to other staff, I don't get as much pushback.
Yep. Yep.
The kids,
And I've noticed with these type of things, it's very much not a Band-Aid solution. You're actually doing preventative work. So it's not just putting out fires here and here because you've laid the foundation, the trust, so that you can sustain yourself a little bit better too. When you're just putting out fires all day, every day, crisis, 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 you're going to burn out.
yes, yes,
I have
very
been
much
there
so.
and lived that life.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I think we all have. Well, I just want to, I've left some resources here if people want to check out some things more about trauma-informed care, trauma symptoms, TBRI. And I just want to say, Chantel, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with us, to talk a little bit more about this model. And I think it's such an important reminder that our work matters. Our work is so interpersonal. Just want to remind people that it's so interpersonal, and this is why you can never replace this piece. Trust is earned and trust is built. So,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Do you have any last things that you want to share before we wrap up?
The only thing is we have a tough job. We're in a tough field, but just remember to take care of yourself.
Yes.
That's my biggest thing. Always remember to take care of yourself.
We say it a bunch, but really, 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 like, we mean it. We mean
Yes.
I love that. Thank you, Chantel. And I will put the resources up so people can learn more about TBRI and dive a little bit deeper.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.